Today is the day of his release, but the warden Javert deliberately made things difficult, forcing Valjean to carry an impossibly heavy mast to complete his final day of labor. This was a nearly impossible task. Yet, Valjean was born with great strength. He clenched his teeth and with extreme effort lifted the mast step by step, carrying it before Javert. He thought he had finally won his freedom, but Javert handed him his release papers while sternly warning that Valjean must report to the local police station on a regular basis, and if he failed to do so, he would be arrested and imprisoned again. This meant the mark of shame would follow Valjean for the rest of his life. Hearing this, he felt both furious and wronged. 19 years ago, Valjean had only stolen a piece of bread to feed his starving nephew. Yet he was sentenced to prison, and after 19 years he was left with no true escape or freedom. Such a cruel law seemed without justice, but Javert treated it as the ultimate truth. Before Valjean left, Javert once again warned him to obey the law, promising that he would always be watching. Though filled with anger, Valjean still took the release papers and walked out of the prison. Yet because of those very papers, he was despised wherever he went. No one would hire him, and even children mocked and bullied him on the streets. At night, he begged an innkeeper to let him rest in the stable, but the innkeeper drove him away, afraid he would dirty the place. Cold and starving, with nowhere to go, he lay down to sleep outside a church. But just as he drifted off, a bishop woke him. The bishop seemed gentle and kind. He took Valjean inside, gave him food and a warm bed. But after suffering so much cruelty, Valjean no longer believed there could be good people in the world. He suspected the bishop had hidden motives. So while the bishop slept, Valjean secretly stole all the silver from the church. He did not get far before the police caught him and dragged him back to the bishop. This time it seemed certain he would spend the rest of his life in prison. But to his shock, the bishop did not accuse him. Instead, he handed him the most precious silver candlesticks and said, "You forgot to take these." Valjean was stunned. He took the candlesticks into his hands, and the police no longer pursued him. After they left, the bishop spoke to Valjean with deep earnestness, saying perhaps this was all part of God's plan, urging him to forget the pain and filth of the past, to use the silver to live as an honest and good man, assuring him that God would guide him out of darkness, and hoping this moment could save his soul. Hearing this, Valjean knelt down in thought, and for the first time he began to pray sincerely. After 20 years of torment in prison and humiliation after release, he had wanted to hate the entire world. But at this moment he met the bishop. The bishop's compassion and forgiveness touched Valjean, melting his once cold heart. He could not hold back his tears, and from then on he resolved to change completely. He tore up the parole papers that symbolized his disgrace, deciding to face the world with a new identity. 8 years later, in 1823, France was under oppressive rule. The poor suffered greatly, and the streets of Paris were filled with beggars. By then, Valjean had taken the name Madeleine, and with the silver given by the bishop, he had built a new life, becoming the mayor of Montreuil and running a factory with hundreds of workers. One day, his former warden Javert was transferred there to work under him. Seeing Javert humbly pledge loyalty, Valjean felt uneasy and even amused. Luckily, his transformation was so great that Javert did not recognize him. Just then, someone called from downstairs, and Valjean rushed down. A horse-drawn cart had overturned, pinning the old driver beneath. In the crisis, Valjean acted without hesitation, lifting the heavy cart with sheer strength and saving the old man. This scene reminded Javert of the convict Valjean, planting suspicion in his heart. Soon after, he secretly wrote a report to the police headquarters in Paris. That night, while patrolling the streets, Javert saw a prostitute quarreling with a man. The man quickly pointed to the scratches on his face, claiming the woman had attacked him without cause. Javert asked no questions and tried to arrest her, ignoring her desperate pleas. Just then Valjean passed by, and he recognized the woman as one of his factory workers, Fantine, and hurried to ask what had happened. But Fantine, upon seeing him, bitterly accused him, saying that all her suffering was because of him, that he had allowed the foreman to cast her out, and now he pretended to be kind. It turned out Fantine had a child out of wedlock, abandoned by her lover. To support her daughter, she took a job at Valjean's factory while sending money to the inn that housed her child. But jealous co-workers discovered her secret, spreading rumors and insults, and when she tried to defend herself, chaos broke out. "Valjean, busy with other matters, left the problem to the foreman. The foreman, who had long desired Fantine but was rejected, mocked her cruelly when he learned she had a child, and spitefully dismissed her. Without work, Fantine was forced to pawn her belongings to survive. Tricked by a market dealer, she sold her long hair, then her 2 front teeth, and finally was driven into street work. The man she had resisted earlier had tried to force himself on her, and in defending herself, she had scratched his face. Hearing her story, Valjean was filled with guilt. Pitying her plight, he immediately took her away for treatment. Not long after, Javert received a reply from the headquarters, saying that the fugitive Valjean had been caught and would stand trial the next day. It seemed that he had wronged the mayor. Javert then went to Valjean to apologize, but to his surprise, Valjean did not blame him. Instead, he told him to return to his work with peace of mind. After Javert left, Valjean fell into a painful dilemma. If he stayed silent, his conscience would torment him. He could not let an innocent man take his place as a scapegoat. But if he turned himself in, years of hard work would be lost, and the hundreds of workers under him would lose their jobs. After a night of struggle, his conscience prevailed, and he rode through the night to the courthouse, publicly admitting that he was the fugitive Valjean. The judges could not believe that this dignified mayor was a convict. In the end, he had to declare that if they did not believe him, they should let Javert confront him at the hospital. Then he quickly left the courtroom. At that moment, Fantine was already gravely ill. Her only concern was her daughter Cosette. Before she passed, she entrusted her daughter to Valjean, and Valjean promised to take care of Cosette. Only then did Fantine close her eyes and leave this tragic world. Just then, Javert rushed to the hospital, blocking Valjean's path. Valjean begged Javert for 3 days, promising to settle Cosette's future before turning himself in. But Javert, who hated crime with blind devotion, refused to listen. In his eyes, Valjean was only making excuses to escape. After a fierce struggle, Valjean leapt into the river and escaped. Cosette was left in the care of a small inn, where the Thénardier couple were cruel by nature, deceitful, and capable of every wicked act. They cherished their own daughter, but treated little Cosette like a servant, even sending her out alone at night to fetch water from the woods. Valjean found Cosette, and when he saw her thin and frail figure, he immediately took her back and confronted the innkeepers. He paid 1,500 francs to free Cosette, gave her a doll, and told her that from now on he was her father. She was his daughter, and he would always take care of her. Then they left by carriage, and as Cosette lay in Valjean's arms, he felt a complex emotion in his heart, a sense of being needed. It seemed as though all the suffering he had endured no longer mattered, for his world now held hope and light. He could not tell if it was he who saved Cosette, or Cosette who saved him. But as they were leaving the city, Javert had already set up a checkpoint at the gates. Valjean quickly abandoned the carriage and fled with Cosette on foot. They reached a church and pleaded for help from an old man who recognized Valjean at once. The man was the very one Valjean had once rescued from under the cart. Without hesitation, he hid them and kept them safe from Javert's pursuit. Once again, Javert had failed. Standing above the city, he swore to the heavens that he would one day capture Valjean and deliver justice. 9 years later, in 1832, class conflict in France had become even harsher. The poor were suffering, while the nobles lived in luxury, and the people's anger reached its breaking point as young revolutionaries marched through the streets. At their head was a handsome young noble, Marius, who defied his family's will and lived among the common folk, earning their respect. That day, he saw Valjean and Cosette in the crowd. Cosette had grown into a beautiful young woman, walking arm in arm with Valjean as she helped the poor. Marius and she locked eyes, and in that silent moment, it was love at first sight. Meanwhile, the Thénardier had already fallen to the streets, yet they still schemed and deceived, and when they recognized Valjean as the man who once took Cosette, they tried to extort him again. Valjean refused, and just then Javert appeared on patrol, so Valjean quickly took Cosette and escaped in the chaos. Seeing the girl he adored suddenly vanish, Marius panicked, desperate to find her, so he turned to Éponine, the innkeeper's daughter, and begged her to discover Cosette's name and address, unaware that Éponine secretly loved him. Even though it broke her heart, she agreed to help. That night, the revolutionaries gathered to plan the uprising, but Marius was distracted, his mind filled only with thoughts of Cosette. Éponine found him and told him she had learned Cosette's address, and Marius rushed away in excitement. Meanwhile, Cosette too was longing for Marius, but all these years she had been fleeing with Valjean, who still would not tell her why. At last they quarreled, and Cosette stormed out to walk alone, only to meet Marius coming to find her. They were both overwhelmed with joy, and through the fence they poured out their feelings, unwilling to part. Éponine, watching from the shadows, felt her heart break, happy that Marius had found love, yet crushed by her own despair. Just then danger arrived. Éponine's father had sided with Javert, leading a group of men to capture Valjean in hopes of gaining credit. Éponine tried to resist and was struck, so she shouted loudly to warn Valjean. Hearing her voice, Valjean quickly fled with Cosette. Before leaving, Cosette left a letter for Marius at the gate, giving her new address. However, the letter was taken by Éponine, and after struggling for a long time, she secretly hid it away. Unable to find Cosette, Marius was heartbroken. But the revolutionaries had already set the next day for the uprising, and the people were filled with passion and resolve, Marius among them. The next day gunfire rang out, as the rebels clashed with the king's soldiers in the streets, but outgunned and outnumbered, they were forced to retreat. The citizens threw furniture into the streets to block the soldiers' advance. Javert, disguised in plain clothes, had infiltrated the rebels, but a young boy exposed him, and he was bound and set aside for judgment. As night fell, the king's army launched a full assault. The rebels fought bravely but were pushed back step by step. Just as Marius was about to be struck, in a flash, Éponine threw herself forward without hesitation and took the bullet for him. At the critical moment, Marius lifted a barrel of gunpowder, ready to fight with all his might, and finally forced the soldiers to retreat for the time being. As Éponine lay dying, she handed Cosette's letter to Marius, then closed her eyes peacefully in his arms. Marius, helpless and unable to leave, asked a young boy to deliver a letter to Cosette, a farewell letter filled with love. The letter was intercepted by Valjean, and after reading it, he realized Marius's situation, but his heart was in turmoil with jealousy, fear, anger, unease, and worry. He knew that sooner or later Cosette would meet a man who loved her, but he never expected that day to come so soon. After much thought, Valjean decided to save Marius, the boy who had captured his daughter's heart. He disguised himself as a soldier and slipped to the front line, where he helped the rebels by killing an attacker and saving everyone. After gaining their trust, he noticed Javert tied up nearby and asked the rebels to hand Javert over to him for handling. Taking Javert into an alley, Valjean thought their 17-year feud would end there, but instead he cut the ropes and let him go. Javert looked at him in confusion, saying, "Even if you release me today, I will still never spare you." Valjean replied, "You are wrong. You have always been wrong. You were only doing your duty. I have never hated you. Never." At dawn, the rebels and the king's army clashed in their final battle. The king's army was well-trained, well-equipped, and finally brought out cannons. Amid the storm of bullets and fire, Valjean dragged the severely wounded Marius into the sewers. The young men who fought for freedom fell one after another to the roar of artillery. Yes, the uprising ended in failure, but it was forever remembered in history as the famous June Rebellion of 1832 in Paris. After the battle, Javert returned to clear the battlefield, but he could not find Valjean's body. When he saw an open sewer cover, he immediately realized where Valjean had gone. Meanwhile, as Valjean struggled to drag Marius out of the sewers, Javert was already waiting at the exit. No matter how Valjean begged, Javert refused to allow him time to help Marius. Seeing Marius near death, Valjean had no choice but to hoist him on his shoulders and walk straight past Javert. But until the very end, Javert never fired a shot. After Valjean left, Javert completely fell into self-doubt. He felt that he had betrayed the law he had treated as his very faith, and now he did not know how to face his own heart. In despair, he leapt into the cold Seine River and ended his life. When Marius recovered, he returned to the place where they had fought, and with their comrades all gone, he was consumed with grief, questioning what all the sacrifice had been for. Fortunately, Cosette was at his side, comforting him, encouraging him. Seeing the two young people so happy together, Valjean felt no more burdens and decided to entrust Cosette to Marius, but he himself would leave. Facing Marius's confusion, he recounted his difficult life, confessing that, as a fugitive, he feared dragging Cosette down, and for her happiness, he had to disappear, asking Marius never to tell her, forever. With endless sorrow and reluctance, he left alone. Not long after, Marius and Cosette were married, with many guests attending, and even the Thénardiers sneaked in. They lied, claiming they had saved Marius, hoping to scam money once again. But Marius did not believe them, and with a few words he exposed their lies, learning instead that the man who truly saved him was Valjean. Marius was deeply moved and immediately took Cosette to find her father, his savior. By then Valjean, free of all attachments, was in a monastery, praying sincerely to God, asking for forgiveness for all his sins, and praying that Cosette would live in happiness and peace. After that, he leaned weakly against the chair, and in a daze he saw the figure of Fantine. Suddenly the word "father" pulled him back to reality. Marius and Cosette had rushed in, kneeling before him, holding his hands tightly, unwilling to let go. Knowing his end was near, he urged them to love each other, support each other, and live out their lives together. At last he handed Cosette a letter, recording the story of his entire life. He told her to open it only after his death, then closed his eyes forever, ending his life of hardship. The film ends here. This story is adapted from the novel of the same name by Victor Hugo, first published in 1862. The book covers the Napoleonic Wars in the following decades, weaving Valjean's journey together with France's history, revolutions, wars, moral philosophy, justice, and faith, creating a vast and epic tale. Especially Valjean's dramatic life, full of rises and falls, leaves audiences deeply moved. Though kind at heart, he suffered endlessly, and just when he was ready to hate the world, he met a merciful bishop who helped him recover his soul and gave him the means to start anew. The characters are vividly drawn, the scale magnificent, making it a masterpiece of realism and romanticism combined, a true encyclopedia of human suffering. The film earned a high rating of 8.7 on Douban, and upon release it won the Golden Globe Award for Best Motion Picture in the musical or comedy category. In short, a musical film with a unique flavor. That's all for today. See you next time.